It's been a rocky start to the podcast, let me tell you. About 5 minutes before I started to come on and go live, I had some weird technical issue that turned off all of my audio and wouldn't let my mixer talk. We had no sound, we had nothing. Guess what? It's fixed. We're live, although we are 3 minutes late. So I'm not sure how many audience people are going to be watching, but live, maybe they'll start trickling in here now that we're back on.
Usual discount for we give,
Yeah, yeah. This is a discounted episode, so you'll get a good portion of your money back from this one. Hi, I'm Dale Franks.
I'm Michael Wade.
And okay, we're live now. We're back for the first time in this is our third week
3 weeks
since we've been here, right? So we took 2
weeks.
Yeah, we took 2 weeks off. Real life. Well, you're getting every penny, audience, that you've paid for. So
yes.
So we'll just leave it at that. Real life, unfortunately, intervenes a lot of times, and it makes things work. By the way, I just want to point out that the music is no longer coming off of my phone. Is that right? Yeah, I got a Weem Pro music streamer. And so it connects to first of all, it does connect to the music on my phone. It connects to Amazon Music. It connects to Spotify, SoundCloud, which is what I usually use because that's where I find royalty-free music. And it's just a little black box that I just connected. It has RCA cables, left and right RCA cables that plug directly into my mixer. And there is a little phone app for it so that I can, pick a song to play off of the Weem Pro, but all of this is coming directly off of
So it's like a clearinghouse for all the other streaming services?
Yeah, basically it's like a streaming receiver. So any streaming service that you have, you can just run anything through it, and it hooks up with RCA cables. It hooks up directly to my mixer. So it's basically, you could hook it up to a stereo.
So it's not an instead of, it combines all of your already subscribed to things.
Yeah, everything that I'm subscribed to. So like I'm an Amazon Prime member, so I get Amazon Music automatically, right? I have SoundCloud.
So it's like Outlook for an email kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. So it just pulls in everything, and it's just one little streaming device. It's pretty reasonably priced. It's about $200, which is a big ask, but you can hook it up to your stereo. I mean, I happen to have it hooked up to my mixer. But
stereo.
Yeah. Well, assuming anyone still
Who has a stereo?
Everybody has iTunes and headphones. So why would we have stereos? But it's a pretty cool little device, pretty reasonably priced too. So I'm pretty happy to have it.
I'm hoping you got it for free.
No, it was $200. That wasn't the problem.
After that advertisement, God damn it!
Yeah,
Dale.
Yeah. I should get my $200 back, shouldn't I? No, it's a really, really cool device because I can just throw music on the fly. I don't have to have my phone. My phone isn't hooked up to my mixer. Look at that. It's just floating footloose and fancy free. So
So obviously we don't have business opportunities in any of the SEO terms that come to our page.
Yeah, I'm giving away a lot of free advertising, aren't I? All right. Well, there's a lot that's happened in the 3 weeks since we were last here. So let's.
World's gone to hell. Yeah.
The world's gone to hell. But before we get to that, interesting story actually two interesting stories. And I ran across it because I think it's fascinating how they're juxtaposed. So New Zealand has decided that migration to New Zealand is unsustainable. And so they're going to stop letting people in the country. They are...
Oh, wait, not sheep?
Yeah, I think they would have as many sheep as you wanted, but people are apparently problematic. So no more people coming in unless they meet some fairly strict rules in terms of immigration. And as part of the technical issues that we were having, I'm showing the wrong window, but there we go. There is the right window. And so basically you have to prove, if you're like if you want to have somebody come in the country as a guest worker, for example, you have to prove that it is not possible to hire a New Zealander to do your job, or nobody can come in.
That sounds like a really familiar law. Did we used to have a law like that here?
Yeah, I thought so. But it's New Zealand, which we generally think.
Oh yeah, which has been Little Miss International.
Yeah, exactly.
Anything that any international body says, that's what we follow.
Yeah.
Now we're getting a little bit of NIMBYism.
Yeah, that transnational progressivism goes so far, but apparently no further in New Zealand.
Wait, you didn't think I was going to do that?
Oh, yeah. No. We want you all to migrate to the United States.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
not here.
Yeah,
I mean,
let's not be silly.
We're all for immigration, but we're not fanatics about
somewhere else.
Exactly. So, compare and contrast, as William F. Buckley used to say, with this fella from Venezuela who came here and was telling migrants, hey, come to America and then go to some empty house, break in, and start living there. That way they can't evict you because you now have squatters' rights. And apparently, for whatever reason, he's not supposed to be here either. So ICE, oddly enough, arrested him. I guess this is what you have to do to be actually arrested by ICE. You have to make
you have to mock them.
Yeah, you have to make such a big stink that that they decide, okay, we can't just let you keep running around. You're a problem. As long as the migrants stay under the radar, we can have millions of them here and nobody's going to say anything. But once you become a problem, and of course, he was supposed to check in with authorities. He didn't check in. And
once you become a problem for the administration.
Yeah, once you become a problem for ICE. So,
right.
And this guy had 500,000 followers on TikTok, apparently. So here he is. They tried to interview him and they grabbed him. Now he's in jail. And two things that he says: I came here to the United States because of persecution in my country, but they're doing the same thing to me in the United States, persecuting me.
Maybe you should find a better country.
Yeah, maybe there'll be a country that won't persecute you. But here is a great thing.
Little lion man. Isn't that what Lionel means? It means little lion, right?
Yeah. So he just says it's all misinformation in the media. They're defaming me. They're misrepresenting me. I'm a good father, a good husband, a good son, a good person. I'm humble and respectful to people who respect me.
Oh, bullshit.
Which he follows up with.
Was he reading a card?
Wait a second. Which he follows up with, since he won't he won't let his face appear on the interview. So they're having to actually show like his mugshot to show who he is. However, if you do want to get a picture with him, this good husband, good father, good person who respects all says he has been in touch with his wife, Veronica Torres, since he's been locked up, and insisted the Post contact her so she could charge an undisclosed sum for a good interview with him. The Post does not pay for interviews. So
they tell us.
Yeah, so this guy is a real piece of work. However, he is just one of who knows how many millions have come in. We can only estimate.
And that's what always it just confounds me. The number of alleged illegal aliens has been at around 11-12 million for like 20 years. That was the number. That was an undercounting then.
Yeah, look, that was a number from the 90s. This whole thing, like there are 11 million illegal immigrants in the country. Look, that's a guess, right, but there have been far more than 11 million that have come in over just the past 6 months.
Now, there are a lot of double, triple, and quadruple and whatever, the ones who come over and back again. So, you have to allow for some double counting there. But the idea that it's only been 11 million in the past 20 years, we've had 11 million in just the past 3 years. I mean, that's what we even know about. That's not even what we don't know about.
Yeah, look, it wouldn't surprise me if there were 11 million just in California.
Exactly. I mean, it's a problem, and it's a real problem, and then not just for America. And eventually we're going to assimilate those people. But it's a problem for the people who are attracted to that dangerous journey. It further goes to undermine Mexico, which is really nothing more than a failed narco state at this point. But it doesn't help to have all these coyotes and traffickers basically running the country, and we're inviting them in. We're making it easier for them.
Well, first off, I have a little bone to pick with what you just said. You said, we'll assimilate them eventually. No, we won't. Because we make no attempt to assimilate. No, we don't. We make no attempt.
Yeah, that's true. We stopped doing that a while ago, right?
Right.
Especially with the Spanish speakers.
Yeah, with this multiculturalism thing, they get to keep everything. They get to put the flags of their home nation. I see this all the time here in California. People who fly the Mexican flag in their front yard. Okay, why are you here then? I just don't get like the marches that we have. I mean, all the Mexican flags.
Out on the East Coast, we fly. There are plenty of people fly the Irish flag, always under the American flag, obviously.
Yes, but I'm talking about
the Italian.
Yeah, but I'm talking about flying the Mexican flag solo.
Yeah, and I have seen that a lot in the Southwest.
Yeah, look, if that is the country to which you owe your primary allegiance, I suggest you go there. They could use you.
I do agree with that.
And, we don't, there was a whole thing I remember 10, 15 years ago, we discussed it, about the whole, forcing immigrants to learn English in school. And everybody wanted to do bilingual education. In other words, let's not teach them English. We'll just teach them in Spanish because it's easier. And
that's what happened. And they fell further behind.
Exactly. So we're not assimilating. It's it's funny when you hear stories of people who immigrated here in the 40s or 30s or 50s or heck even the 60s, where they went to school and they started to speak French or Spanish or Dutch or German or whatever, and they were just told flat out, "This is America. We speak English."
Yeah, and
they were just expected to speak English. So I don't think we will assimilate them. And I think the problem goes far beyond that. But
before you get there, let me just say one thing in my defense. The reason I think that we will assimilate them eventually is because the people who are furthest behind in assimilation are the ones that the government has paid special attention to basically non-assimilate and to help them protect their culture, right? So we're looking at a lot of Spanish-speaking people and Chinese-speaking people, but they're still too drawn to the American culture. They tend to break out of it. That's why I'm saying I think we will eventually.
Yeah,
not tomorrow, not next year, not necessarily even this generation, but I think that eventually it does creep in.
Yeah, A, if we have that time, and B, currently Los Angeles County.
Fair enough.
Currently, Los Angeles County prints ballots in over 200 languages now.
I know, that's just ridiculous.
And my problem is, you have the I'm sorry, my phone is ringing, and it's my dad, who's been in the hospital, by the way, this whole week. And I called him earlier and told him, I'm about to do the podcast. I'm not going to be reachable. And what does he do? Of course, he calls immediately. Why wouldn't he? Why?
Dale, it's our podcast. You can do whatever the hell you want.
Look, the traditional libertarian idea of immigration is just let everybody come. Just have open. Of course, their idea is also get rid of the welfare state. So whoever comes here.
As a matter of fact, you can't do both.
Yeah, whoever comes here.
I think that's well understood in the libertarian circles.
Right. However, that's never going to happen because we're never going to get rid of the welfare state. And it is politically impossible to say we'll give American citizens certain benefits, but if you're an immigrant, you get nothing. Good day, sir. That's just not politically possible. Since that is not politically possible, we can't have open immigration. And the problem with the libertarian idea, assuming that you have no welfare state, is that people will be forced to assimilate. If they expect to survive, if they expect to do business with, people who are, were born and raised here, they're going to have to integrate themselves into the culture. But otherwise, we just assume, well, there's a couple of assumptions going on here. Number one, that the rate of immigration will be low enough to allow assimilation over time. And number two, and this is very important, I've mentioned it many times, people are not simply fungible economic units, right? You can't trade a Venezuelan or a Chinese citizen or whoever who have a different concept of what the government is supposed to do, a different concept of the role of politics in society, the amount of power and size that the government should be allowed to have. There are these really fundamental ideas of small, limited government and individual liberty that are necessary underpinnings for our system to work. And if we don't accept those as the sort of the bedrock American ideas about politics, then what we end up doing is losing what America is. I don't want a carbon copy of the Chinese Communist Party or the Venezuelan Communist Party or whatever it may be, or heck, even the Swedish Social Democrats running this country, because I don't feel that those are valid political ideas over the long run. I believe they do far more harm than good. However, once you have basically open immigration with millions of people coming in, all of whom have a much more progressive, for lack of a better term, socialist, communist
relatively
idea about what government is supposed to do, once enough of them are here,
it changes things. You start watering down.
Yeah, you lose the underpinnings of what makes American politics uniquely.
Exactly. Yeah. The founders recognized this. There was a reason that they put in some limits, which obviously aren't applicable anymore, but about how long you had to be in the country before you could run for office and that sort of stuff. We exist in the kind of government that we need as many people to have skin in the game as possible. And when we invite outsiders who have no skin in the game and are there for, the ripening, we're just screwing everybody else. Yeah. And especially those who fought like hell to get into this country in the first place and become actual citizens.
Well, it's been very interesting that when you talk about Hispanics, especially those that were either born here or came here legally, there has been a significant move towards supporting Donald Trump whenever he talks about killing illegal immigration. The conventional... But
they also supported Cesar Chavez for the same reason. Yeah, because he protected their livelihoods.
Yeah, the conventional wisdom is if you talk about immigration from Latin America and talk about cutting it, you're going to lose Latino support in the United States. But
that's never made any sense to me.
But Donald Trump has increased his support among Latinos. One of the primary reasons being because he wants to ensure that there is not just unlimited immigration from Latin America. People who came here legally and who paid, a fairly heavy personal price to do so resent this idea, like this guy from Venezuela, that he's not only here, but he's telling people how to basically steal property from
how to screw the system or work within the system to screw everybody else.
Yeah. Although I note that Florida has put an end to the whole squatting thing.
Yes, they did quite quickly. But that's been a long time in coming because that is a right that's found in far too many states.
Yeah.
Not so much in the South. I'm surprised Florida even had that, but places like New York, Massachusetts, Chicago, or Illinois, certainly California and the Western state. It's far too prevalent.
Yeah. A couple of comments from chat. Earlier this week, there was the Al-Quds Day celebration, where in Dearborn, Michigan, all of the people who were celebrating the Al-Quds Day were chanting "Death to America" as they marched through the streets of Dearborn. And in association with that, another comment, the hubs for illegal immigrants are creating ethnic regions. It's one thing to have a neighborhood in New York City. It's another thing to own entire cities, which, again, goes back to Dearborn, Michigan. I think one of the reasons why Joe Biden's policy vis-a-vis Israel and Hamas is becoming egregious is because he knows he'll lose Michigan if he doesn't carry Flint and Dearborn. And the Muslim communities there are a big voting bloc.
They're a big voting bloc in a couple districts. I think they're overreacting to it because I think they're more worried about not necessarily those districts, but about the fallout to other places where it's more competitive, and they need their progressives to come out. Look, Minneapolis, another they call it Little Somalia, right?
Yes.
And there are a few of these locations where it's heavily Muslim, heavily in favor of Hamas, but they're not enough to swing an election. What they're really worried about is the viral nature of these complaints, and they're
because they get picked up by progressives in general.
Exactly. Yes, and then they get picked up by the mainstream media as well. Look, I mean, these progressives are saying this. I mean, shouldn't we at least report it? Yes, you should, mainstream media. Thank you very much for doing that. Because usually you don't do that.
Yeah, well, by the way, speaking of Biden and, his particular problems, this is kind of an amusing little story here in Ohio.
What?
Biden could be left off the general election ballot in Ohio.
No way.
Ohio's election law requires that the candidates be set 90 days prior to the election. So the deadline for having a candidate put on the ballot in the state of Ohio is August the 7th. The Ohio State Democrats have decided that they're going to hold their nominating convention on August 19th.
After August 7th.
Yeah. So there is a legal deadline in state election law about when the candidates have to be declared to go into the ballot. And
you know what? In this case, I say enforce it. If you're too fucking stupid to play by the fucking rules, fuck you.
Yeah, it's it's a fascinating.
I mean, come on.
It's a fascinating little story.
That's just stupid.
Yeah, well, that's what they've decided they're going to do, and so that's what they've done. August 19th. I suggest.
Don't worry. Somehow the GOP is going to fuck this up too.
Yeah, well, I suggest that they reschedule their date. By the way, for those of you on the listening side, I am having to play around with our volume here. Again, most of you didn't hear this when we came on because none of you were here. About 4 or 5 minutes before we were supposed to go live, something happened and all of my audio settings went haywire. I lost connection to my mixer. All of my sound settings were wrong. I had to try to reconstruct everything. And
it's those damn Indonesians again that sank UNO.
Yeah, whatever it is, I'm still trying to fix it. So I can...
You bastards!
Yeah, well, I can see that my sound and Michael's sound are not equalized, so I'm sort of going back and forth but I am trying to pay attention to the conversation. Just I'm a little bit distracted because, you know, stuff that has been working for months and months
channels
just doesn't work
have
now.
engineers who do this stuff behind the scenes while we're just talking away.
Yeah,
and you're having to
do it live.
You're the entire studio crew.
Yeah, so everything happens, you know, live as it happens. So if it looks like
I think that's forgivable.
So if it looks like I'm distracted, I am. So yeah, this is a weird story. You would think that you would know what state election law is if you ran a state political party. You would think you would know when you have to submit candidates' names.
Presumably you had something to do with setting that date.
Well, I mean, it's state election law. So I mean, the state Democratic Party probably didn't have anything to do with setting that date. That comes out of the legislature.
I'm sure they were advised. You know,
they had to have been.
They put in there, yeah.
So this is just dumb.
It's just dumb.
I suggest that they reschedule their. Well, you know what? Don't reschedule it. Do it on the 19th. Yeah, you know what? Right. You do what you want.
I'm sure you'll talk them into it anyway.
Yeah, but I mean, look, there's a reason why there are these deadlines in election laws, because ballots have to be printed.
They have to print the ballots, right?
Millions of them.
And the ballots going out earlier and earlier through mail, you need a lot of lead time.
Yeah, you can't just cowboy your way through this and the day before the election decide who your candidates are going to be. That's not how this works.
I mean,
yeah, I just,
and it takes a while for like ballots to get to Rudolph at the North Pole, and you know, the snow beast in the Himalayas.
Yeah, so I don't know
a Kentucky address for.
Yeah, I don't know what they were thinking, but that was just an extraordinarily dumb idea. But there you go.
Can we assume that they weren't thinking?
But you know, it is the Democratic Party, and based on how the 2020 election was handled in the COVID crisis, compliance with state election law doesn't seem to be something they're
not a high priority
concerned about.
Yeah.
But I think it'd be funny if it just came back and bit him in the ass on this, because I mean, all this talk about Trump not being on the ballot and having to go to the Supreme Court to say states can't do that. And then now you're
it's
not
like
on
a Frank Capra movie.
Yeah, now you're not on the ballot in Ohio because you're an idiot. However, I think it's emblematic of all of Joe Biden's other policies. How they just don't really comport with reality. And we're going to talk about a Joe Biden policy here in a minute. But before we do that, I think a troubling story is this one. 99-cent stores will be closing all 371 of their locations.
Well, they're not in big cities.
Well, here's the thing. I have two within 10 or 15 blocks of me. I've got one 99-cent store.
You pretend you live in San Diego when you live in Escondido.
Yeah, well, I've got one store that's just a couple of blocks away from me, and one store that's a little farther away. There are some issues with these stores. You have to be very, very careful about things with expiration dates, because often things they sell are past their expiration dates. They're kind of the dumping ground for stuff that isn't going to be sold in, Albertsons.
It's not going to be
Safeway
sold
or Ralph.
They pick up all the excess junk that gets it gets sold on these mass markets. Look, you get lot whatever.
Yeah, and if it's past the expiration date, then
yeah, right.
Maybe people won't check. And look, if it's canned food, expiration dates really aren't all that important.
It doesn't mean anything anyway.
Yeah. But they've been around since 1982. They're going to close all 371 locations. The two things they talked about that I think are important. Number one, inflation. And number two, although they didn't come right out and say it, they just called it shrinkage, is shoplifting.
Right.
It's made their business model unsustainable.
It's made a lot of business models unsustainable.
First of all, you can't just sell this stuff for 99 cents anymore. You can't buy it for that. Inflation has really ruined that.
The taxes on your revenue alone are going to make that formidable.
Yeah, so that's number one. And the rise in shoplifting. You know, we everybody, especially in the mainstream media, kind of likes to point out that, all this talk about shoplifting is just a bunch of far-right BS. But it's really not. The incidence of shoplifting has...
It's certainly not to the store owners.
Yeah, it's risen sharply. And you can now go into a lot of inner cities, and they're just ghost towns now. Why would you have a store when the chances are that your losses from shoplifting, or as they like to call it, shrinkage, are just going to make economic life unsustainable?
I can't imagine. So, I mean, I've been to Telegraph Street in Berkeley. It's like every hippie's dream. There's a head shop like every 4 stores. There's lots of ice cream, or at least there used to be. This was a long time ago. And there were like coffee shops and sandwich shops and, you know, little trinket shops and incense and whatever. It was literally a hippie's dream. I can't imagine trying to walk down that street now. I don't know that you could make it past all the feces and tents and whatever else. I mean, decline is a decision, and that's the decision that a lot of places have made, unfortunately. And I don't get it. I really don't get it. I mean, I get what they see as a short-term benefit, but I don't see how this can ever redound to somebody's benefit to actually drive people into decay and filth.
Well, it doesn't, and B, the people who get hurt the most on this are low-income people, by the way, including the people who work at 99-cent store, because I'm pretty sure that their salaries are not union-level wages like they're paying at Safeway.
Are you kidding me? They're dependent on that employee discount to get it for 79 cents.
Yeah, and so the people who are going to pay, I mean, you know, for me and, you know, for my family, it's sad because we liked to go there. There are certain things they have that we buy a lot of that is so cheap. They have these 1-quart bottles of lemon juice for 99 cents. And you try to buy that at a regular grocery store and they have those little bitty 4-ounce ones for like $3. There are some things that are so cheap you just can't not go there and buy them. We can go there and fill up a shopping cart for $30 and come out with all kinds of stuff, $40, $50, and have all kinds of groceries, especially things like staples. And they do have vegetables and things like that. For people who are low income, these stores are basically a vital connection to the economy and to feed themselves. Because the next step up from 99-cent or Dollar Tree or Dollar General, which we don't have here in California, the next step up from that is one of the major chains. And you're talking probably about a 100 to 200% increase in price for almost anything that you would buy from there. And people have talked a lot, especially in inner cities, about, food deserts,
islands, and
because no one wants to open a store there because it's economically unsustainable. Shoplifting is rampant. The only stores that they end up having are people who will start small, little bodega-like convenience stores.
Right.
But of course, it costs the same amount to pay a driver and a truck to drive to a little bodega and drop off 10 gallons of milk as it
actually costs a little more.
Yeah, as it costs to drive to Safeway and drop off 400 gallons of milk.
Yeah, there's always a discount for that volume.
Yeah, because I'm receiving, if it costs me, let's say $100, whatever the delivery charge is. Let's say it's $100 because that makes the math easy. So if it's $100 for 10 gallons, that's $10 a gallon I'm paying in just delivery fees. So you wonder why a gallon of milk costs, $12 a gallon.
A gallon of gas?
Yeah, well, that's why.
Has that not been always a mystery to people?
Because the delivery fee is going to be the same whether I'm delivering 5 gallons or 500
it's also
gallons.
because it's a protected industry. But yes, that's right.
Well,
you've got that you've got that actual delivery fee on top of it. That I mean that's last resort. You've got to get from distribution center to the last point of product sale, and that requires trucks, and that's not cheap. You can't do it any other way.
No, and the smaller volume you have delivered, the more expensive it is per unit to deliver. And so one of the reasons why these 99-cent stores have done so well, and why they're able to, and why they have, at least up to now, been able to keep those prices, is because they are large enough to have large deliveries. And so you have a reliable source of, and it's not just food that they sell there. They have all kinds of household goods, obviously cheap stuff, but still, if you need pots or pans or dishes or glasses or whatever, they generally have those there. They have a large enough inventory with enough variety that if you're a lower income person, you can rely on a Dollar General or a 99-cent store to kind of outfit your, well, we'll assume it's an apartment in that particular case.
You're double wide.
Yeah.
So
if you're a young, 19-year-old working your first job for minimum wage,
where a single wide would have been kind of the norm 50 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, that wasn't even a bad deal. A single wide, fuck yeah.
Yeah, but now that these stores are going, and by the way, Dollar Tree and Dollar General, and of course they've all had their problems, but these things are going away. It's one thing when CompUSA and Circuit City goes out of business, right? Oh, I have no place to buy my expensive stereo system anymore. Right. Yeah, that's inconvenient. Right. But, Amazon exists. So you can get a Weem music streamer that you can hook up to your mixer. And you can get that off Amazon. I've heard
about that before. That's a really interesting thing.
What you're not going to get off of Amazon is fresh tomatoes. At least not at a price that you can have at the dollar store. So if I was a lower we're making life much, much harder for low income individuals. And this
almost seems like that's the point, doesn't it?
Well, see, slowly I was getting there. Who would have Sorry,
I jumped the gun.
Who would have an incentive to ensure that people can't find cheap, reliable food or housewares or whatever? Who would be in the best position to, I don't know, perhaps give them some form of check or stamp that they could present at a regular store to get their food and stuff, which someone else would largely pay for?
Well, and then you might even have some rules in place, for production. If you need to produce things in an emergency, and you could order industries to produce more of those pots and pans. And
who benefits when a larger and larger section of the populace finds themselves dependent?
Yeah, dependent would be the word.
And by the way, we could...
Yeah, that's interesting.
And by the way, we could go back over the last...
that's a tough one. Yeah.
We could go back over the last 40 and 50 years and just look at how things have changed. And I'm going to sound like a commie here, but facts are facts. If you go back to 1950 and you look at what top paid CEOs made, they made between 40 and 70 times what their bottom entry-level wage workers made. And if you look at what has changed over the past, especially over the past 30 years, 35 years, it's now 300, 400, 500 times what their employees make. You have C-suite executives who are walking home with 20, 30, 40 million a year plus stock options, which are often worth 100 million or more, in an industry where they're paying their workers minimum wage. And they're
not paying their workers minimum wage.
Well, yeah, close to it. Things like light manufacturing out here in California, where they were, making $7 or $8 maybe an hour. Yeah, but it doesn't matter what you're paying your workers. The fact is that the multiple of income that are owned by C-level executives has gone from 50 times to 500 times.
Right. But how does that multiple of income? So we're taking that delta between the average income of C-suite, essentially, and maybe some below that.
Well, there's a couple of ways to do it. One of the more common ways is just to look at CEO salaries. CEO salaries, basis
versus
average,
your common average wage labor person. Right. Okay. First of all, that would require me to believe in the wage labor value idea, and I don't. Second of all, I would wonder how much different the delta is between earnings since that time when the delta between CEO and average wage laborer was 30 or 40 times. How much has revenue grown in that same time? I want to know the different deltas. You know what I mean? Like, it's one thing to say, well, now it's like 100 and 300, 400 times. Okay, but what how has productivity added to the wage labor part of that, and how has everything else added to the pure cost of everything? So that I think you understand where I'm going here.
I understand where you're going. You don't necessarily have to believe in the labor theory of value.
That's true. Yeah.
To believe in that, but I think it was more common in the 40s and 50s to pay workers more as a share of revenues than it was. And I'm trying to find, and had I known we were going to get into this, I probably would have pulled it up. I'm trying to find on BLS average weekly earnings, but I want them in constant dollars, not nominal dollars. So I'd have to go back and change it to find constant dollars. So median weekly earnings 336 in 2014, and let me see if I can find it. Well, it's a PDF file, so I'm used to going to BLS.
It's going to take some actual.
Yeah, I'd have to go to BLS and look at it. But in general, one thing that is largely true is that wages have not increased in line with GDP the way that they did prior to 1973.
And why is that?
I don't know. I think part of it is the increasing financialization of business. And basically...
So there's additional costs. Is that what you mean?
No. The fact that so many more businesses now go public rather than...
But hasn't been seen a reverse in the last 20 years? Correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like a lot fewer companies go public. Well, maybe not a lot fewer, but I feel like it's hit a nadir, and we're not seeing as many, or maybe a plateau.
Yeah, well, I'd have to go to the BLS website and do some research, which I'm not going to do here live. But the fact is that we have seen this divergence. I mean, it's been very well known and commented on for the past 20 years how wages, especially middle class wages, are falling behind increases in GDP and increases in productivity. Where if you go back prior to 1973, wages and productivity were tied basically, at the waist. That doesn't seem to be true anymore. And middle class wages are increasingly stagnating. Again, who benefits from that? Who benefits from creating and look, even poor people in this country, our biggest health risk with poor people is obesity, right? It's not starving to death in the streets. So if you're poor in the United States, you're still in the top 10% of the entire global population in terms of wealth.
We're not creating a society that can sustain itself if we're dying of obesity and not actually increasing our wealth.
Right.
So,
but when you just look at the economy as a whole and you look at things that the socialists find important, like the Gini coefficient, which measures the amount of wealth inequality.
Yep.
America 60 years ago was a much more equal society.
I'm sure that's absolutely true.
There was a much smaller difference between the very rich and the very poor. Yes, there's always going to be a John D. Rockefeller. There's always going to be a John Jacob Astor. They're always going to exist. There's always going to be outliers. But in terms of the bell curve, there were a lot more people. The bell curve was a lot higher in the middle than it is now. And the bell curve
were a lot more black people, Chinese people, and other people other than just white people in that curve,
bell curve
back in the 50s, right?
Yes.
So
and those bell curves have become shorter and wider.
Right. And so that's what I mean by when the government has stepped in to help out those poor Hispanics, those poor black people, all they've done is hurt them. They've literally retarded their natural progression. I mean, they're human beings like anybody else. They're incentivized by the same thing everybody else is, right? Yeah, maybe they like different music or different dance styles. What the fuck does that matter? Yeah. We all want to take care of our families. We all want to actually have a nest egg, maybe even something we can pass down to our family. We want to look out for our families. That's got nothing to do with anything other than being human. I mean, this is the human condition throughout the world.
Yeah, but see, here's the thing. When the government intervenes in the case of African Americans and things go awry, they're only 13% of the population, right? So, A, we are largely unaware of the negative effects of that intervention. And B, it affects a smaller group of people, so we don't see it overall in our lives. It doesn't affect us. The problem starts whenever government decides they want to help everybody. And the way that government wants to help everybody is make them dependent on the government. And now since 1973, we have slowly started to see what government help has done to the economy as a whole. And what it's doing is it is largely creating a system of, in specifically American terms, haves and have-nots. Obviously, in global terms, it's all haves. So I get the fact. We're in the richest, most privileged society that's ever existed in human history.
Absolutely true. Absolutely true.
However, we are not as equitable a society as we were 50 years ago. And I think that's undeniable.
Also absolutely true.
And I think if you want to start looking at reasons for the lack of social cohesion, reasons for why our politics has become so disjointed and so partisanized, we have a political system that is just not working. And we're just now starting to see what black people saw 30 years ago. And it's now just starting to become obvious the government has, well, as we said before, if they were intentionally trying to destroy society, I don't know what they would have.
What would they do differently? Right. Partisanized? That was the word you came up with?
Partisanized.
All right. You know what? As a lawyer, I'm going to give you a pass. I think that was a perfectly appropriate creation of a word.
Yeah, that is my own neologism. Partisanized.
I like that. Partisan. I thing is, I understood exactly what you meant.
Yeah, I mean, it's obvious in context.
And then that's communication. That's a word. From now on.
And if there is a problem in society, incomes are unequal. Well, who do we look to solve it? The government. And how does the government solve it? Well, we need more of your money so that we can transfer some of your money to someone else.
You know, it's funny. I happened to catch a little bit of, so Ben Shapiro has a late night radio show, not late night. It's like 8 o'clock hour. Right. And so I happened to be driving home from a dinner somewhere and caught a little bit of his thing. And at this point in his show, he was talking about how kind of like, I always forget if it was H.L. Mencken or G.K. Chesterton who said that, it's not the worry that people stop believing in God. It's they will now believe in anything.
Yeah, it's G.K. Chesterton.
And he was kind of
when people stop
Chesterton.
When people stop believing in God, it is not that they believe in nothing. It is that they will believe in anything.
Anything, right. And so he was kind of playing off that. I mean, not explicitly, but it was interesting the way he framed it. And I thought it was an interesting way of looking at things, was that, the more that religion and God and those community, I guess, regulators, not official, they couldn't really tell us what to do, but they had sort of a social pressure and force to kind of get us to follow a line, right? When that started going away, people stopped looking to church and they stopped going to church and they started looking to the government to do these things. So in a lot of ways, and I think that's a pretty accurate general assessment. Not going into all the reasons or anything, but as far as things have progressed, I think that's a fair assessment. And I think that with that over reliance on government, we've just sort of emptied ourselves of any critical value judgment or reason. And I mean, you saw it with the whole pandemic, right? How easily so many people just were like, okay, yep, we'll just shut down. We won't do anything. We'll never leave our houses. We'll never talk to anybody. We'll wear masks even when we go to sleep and we're under the snuggle of our covers.
See, but here's the thing, and this is the big difference. And we'll talk about people's childlike faith in the goodness of government in a minute. The difference is that if I go to church on Sunday and my preacher says, or my priest says, if you do X, you will go to hell, that does place some sort of moral onus on me to not do X. When the government takes the place of that and becomes the recipient of your moral instruction, and the government says, do not do X or you will go to jail.
Right.
That is a completely different incentive that is being provided to me. Because what the priest or preacher tells me is a moral compulsion that I am perfectly free to ignore. And if I do,
and I answer to God for that.
And if I do,
not that priest.
Yeah, and if I do ignore it, well, you know what? There's not much you can do about it, other than tut tut. If the government says don't do X or do X and you decide to do otherwise, the government will send men with guns to take you away. And if you don't want to be taken away, they will, if necessary, kill you. And the COVID pandemic was such a great explanation of this, or a great illustration of this. Out here in California, this guy who is literally surfing alone 100 yards off the beach. And basically Huntington Beach police had to show up so that when he came to shore, they were waiting so that they could arrest him and take him to jail. He was not supposed to be outside.
They had to work so hard to get his attention. He was so far out.
You know, how dare you be on the beach having fun alone? That is a criminal offense. Yeah, it's a criminal offense because we got the government involved in it. And the government only has one tool, force.
Right.
And when that's the only tool,
and that's the big difference.
When the only tool is a hammer or is a nail, or the only tool is a hammer, every problem becomes a nail. And so, okay, we'll just apply force. We will handcuff you and drag you away. And by the way, our cops are armed. So if you don't let us handcuff you and drag you away, we will proceed to beatings and then shootings should it become necessary. And there's no
And wouldn't you
recourse.
rather have some school marms who you also hate, who you find fucking annoying as shit? Wouldn't you rather have them trying to shame you than potentially having your freedom taken?
Yeah, government doesn't care about
I'd
shame.
rather, at least then it's in the realm of there's an argument to be had.
The government cares neither about shame nor about morality. They care about compulsion.
Right. Exactly.
Once we've said this is the law, you have no choice but to comply. And it doesn't.
And morality with compulsion is no morality. Morality can only come from within. It is not something you can force on somebody. It's not possible.
But there were so many people that once the government said, and look, Donald Trump, he's the guy that made the decision. Let's shut everything down. Let's just not allow people to go outside. Let's not, we will, 2 weeks to stop the spread. That 2 week had turned into,
nobody believed it.
A year.
Nobody believed that shit.
Yeah, that's not a power the government has or should have to tell you. The government can advise. The government can say, look, we believe that it would be best if you minimized going out, that you stayed at home as much as possible. If it's possible to run your business with your employees working from home, we strongly suggest you do that. They made it the law. And
unless you're a strip club, you're fine.
Yeah, and once they made it the law, well, great. Now we can get all the cops involved. Because Lord knows.
Well, we said this when
enough.
All this went down, that it sure looks like a dry run for how to completely control the entire country.
Yeah, if you can get them
local sources,
all you got to do is scare them enough to voluntarily comply. And look, a third of people are going to do whatever the government tells them to do.
Unfortunately, yeah, even in America.
And that same third will try to use shame, or if they have to, call the cops.
Hey, at least in Australia, they like fought enough to get placed in camps.
Yeah, camps, by the way, in Australia.
They got placed in fucking camps.
They got placed in camps. And did the Australians rise up? No. We've talked a lot about national divorce and stuff like this, but I sure see a lot of Americans who are just willing to knuckle under. Look,
far too many. And that's what we saw really during the pandemic, right?
Let me make my money.
How many people? Yeah. They were like, well, great. I don't have to go anywhere. I can keep working on my computer. I was doing that anyway. Whereas hardworking people have to go outside to fucking work. Fishermen, farmers, truckers, like hell, grocery store clerks. They had to go and risk their lives. Actually, it should have been about risk. But nobody else had to. Look, and we could shut down all these fucking companies. That was absolutely ridiculous.
Here in California, famous story. Lady ran a restaurant. She lost this restaurant, by the way, shut down. Because when the COVID lockdowns came, she could not serve food in her restaurant. However, there was a movie being filmed nearby, so in the parking lot right next to hers, a
I remember
a
this.
Hollywood catering company opened up the
Yes.
catering area so that they could have a commissary for the film shoot. Oh,
Yeah, and it
okay.
wasn't her catering.
Yeah. So the actors, they can all get their, they can all get their commissary services. They can get their catering. They can eat in the parking lot, literally next door to mine. But I can't
Of a
open my
place that
restaurant.
we shut down so that we can bring in a competitor and serve their food.
Exactly.
That's just so fucking tyrannically rude.
Yeah. And the majority of Americans let them get away with it. My fear now is not that there'll be a civil war. My fear now is that 80% of Americans will just knuckle under and do whatever.
And it's not just
told.
Americans. I fear that there are far too many people in this world who are devoid of any sense of the concept of individuality or freedom.
Yeah, and when
I don't think they understand it.
And when Klaus Schwab gets up there and says you'll live in your 15-minute cities and you'll sleep in your pod and you'll eat the bugs, you'll own nothing and be happy.
Yeah, good luck getting bugs.
And
I'm not going in that 15-minute city.
Yeah, and a minimum of 30% of the people will say, grasshoppers sound yummy. My pod is so small and comfy.
I'm totally
It's like
taken
being
care
in a
of.
warm hug.
I don't have to do anything else. I'm just done. I don't have any responsibility whatsoever. Okay.
It's I always find it amusing whenever I watch sort of the post Roddenberry era of Star Trek, right? Where Jean-Luc Picard is like, I think you would find the economics of the 24th century very confusing. Yeah, and the idea that you would have starships and people in them in the 24th century, I find unbelievable. Because the second that you get a post-scarcity economy, where in Star Trek terms it's the replicator, right? I can build anything with a replicator. Any machine, any structure, any food, it's all there. It is essentially...
The whole concept is that like,
it's essentially
need
free.
is gone.
Yeah, everything is free. And so there's this human flourishing as people just decide that, well, I'll go and go through this horrible and very complex and intellectually challenging Starfleet Academy and become a Starfleet officer. And I think...
And dangerous.
And I think, in reality, what happens is, hey, if I can get all my food, all of my housing, all of my transportation, all free, and I have no worries about life anymore. And with that level of technology, they also have the holodeck. Oh, so I can have free food, free housing, free transportation, and I can fuck Claudia Schiffer on the holodeck anytime I want. There's not going to be anybody building starships.
Who's Claudia Schiffer?
Oh,
I'm totally fucking with you.
The model, Claudia Schiffer. Of course, that probably ages me. I should probably come up with some younger, hotter model than Claudia Schiffer, who's probably my age now, 60. So probably nobody remembers when she was a supermodel. But the fact is, what is the incentive for doing anything?
Well, that was
all of your
exactly. That was George Orwell's point in Animal Farm, right? Where's your incentive? And then he showed all the other incentives. The horse was the one who was the true blue, who got just absolutely worked to death. That was his idea of how communism actually works.
Or even better, Aldous Huxley in Brave New World.
Collectivism of any sort, quite often.
Yeah, but even better, Aldous Huxley in Brave New World. Here, we'll give you drugs, food, sex, anything you want.
Aldous Huxley's Brave New World is probably closer to what we actually have today.
Yeah, I think it was way more prophetic. And
yeah, I agree. Although, when it comes to language, at least language alone, Orwell was freaking spot on.
Yeah,
Because
well,
that's exactly what they do with language. And
yeah.
that was his thing. That was always his thing, was language.
Yeah, well, it's like Jeff Goldstein from the old Protein Wisdom blog has been talking about for like 20 years. Language is sort of the key to understanding.
Yes, and he's right. Actually, we need to get him on the program at some point.
Yeah,
He's been writing some interesting stuff.
I don't know him. You do, so
I do. Yeah. He's a good guy. So he would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'd be fascinated to have him on because he's also a fairly amusing fellow as well.
He's very funny. He's very sharp.
Okay, one last thing, and okay, it's 6:08, so this means that we have about 22 minutes before we hit our hour and a half, where we usually stop.
Okay, because we're so on time like that.
I don't know if we can fully cover this in 22 minutes. By the way, I'm
a little worried.
I'm informed that Claudia Schiffer is 53.
Oh, she's even younger than I am.
So here we go. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken at the meeting prior to the NATO summit that will come up later this year, talking in front of the representative to NATO of Ukraine, and just saying Ukraine will become a member of. Well, why? You don't need to listen to what I say. You can listen to what Anthony Blinken says, or you could if I could turn his volume on.
NATO. Ukraine will become a member of NATO.
Let's start that again. We'll do it one more time.
Ukraine will become a member of NATO. Our purpose at the summit is to help build a bridge to that membership and to create a clear pathway for Ukraine moving forward. We've done a lot of work on that over the last couple of days here in Brussels. A lot more work to be done between now and the summit. But we will see, I think, in the summit, very strong support for Ukraine going forward in its relationship with NATO.
At a time when Ukraine is engaged in a years-long war at this point with another nuclear power, this may not be an appropriate discussion to be having.
This is creating so many schisms potentially. It's stupid beyond belief. We need Russia isolated, not engaged. We need to hold them back to where they are and not invite further trouble. And NATO is not equipped to do this. We are NATO.
I mean, at the end of the day, yes, NATO is us.
Yeah. And we don't have the resources that we did because we've given them all to Ukraine. Poland is standing strong, and you know what? I got a lot of faith in Poland.
I do. But look, so do I. But the Poles are nuts, and if they could go to war with Russia and bring the rest of us in with it, they would.
Yeah, that's a problem.
The Poles hate
I'm not going to lie,
the Russians.
But at least I know they're stalwart, right? I don't want to go to war with Russia. It's not because I think it would be. Well, actually, no, that's not true. I do think it would be overly hard. I think we're already too stretched. I don't think we have the capability to finish them off the way that would be needed to do in order to absolutely subdue Russia. I don't think we have that capability right now. We don't have those allies right now. And now we're trying to add in an ally who does hate Russia, but is also a lot like Russia. It's kind of Russia-like. I don't see that as being a good additive, and it's only going to do it's going to incite Russia even more? Well, I don't understand.
I have a different analysis.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think one of the things that has become obvious. Look, Russia is a country of 180 million people. Ukraine is a country of
35, 40.
30 maybe. All other things being equal, Russia should have been able to do what they did in 2014. March in there with banners waving and trumpets blaring while the Ukrainians rolled over like weasels and exposed their softest parts. That's what they thought would happen.
Right.
After 2014, Ukraine became much closer with the West, began training in Western combat techniques and stuff like that. And though their equipment was largely Soviet-era equipment, their training and tactics were vastly improved. Second, Russia's historic performance in warfare has been to lose, and expend millions of lives in the process. And they're happy to trade 1 for 1 or 2 for 1 or 5 to 1 if necessary, because they have it, because they will eventually, via attrition, have the ability to exhaust their enemies and then win. Russia's entire history of warfare has been the start of war, even the wars they've won, has been absolute and unmitigated disaster for the first half of the war. And then finally, they just simply overcome the enemy by sheer weight of numbers. As Stalin once said, quantity has a quality all of its own. Because they did not defeat the Ukrainians. It became obvious to Western military analysts that if we do go to war with Russia, we will probably wipe them out within hours. And once we do that, the only tool left in Russia's pocket is nuclear weapons. And if you look, and by the way, every country does this. Every country with nuclear weapons does this. Every country publishes their nuclear weapons strategy. And a lot of times governments lie, but this is one of those things where governments have a real incentive not to lie and to tell you exactly when they're going to nuke you
to give you the red line.
So that nobody makes a mistake and ends up having a whole bunch of missiles shooting at them because they misunderstood things. And Russia has a very clear nuclear doctrine. And that nuclear doctrine is, if you read between the lines, if we go to war with the West, our army sucks, you'll probably kill all of our guys. And once we feel like Russia itself is under a threat and is no longer defended by our army, we will just unleash our entire nuclear arsenal on you.
Yeah, mad.
And then we
saw this in the 80s. Yeah.
And then, we'll let the chips lie where they are. And so I think there's two ways of handling this. One way of handling this is the stupid way, which apparently the Biden administration is doing, which is to say, hey, fine, we'll just let Ukraine become a member of NATO. What's Russia going to do? Because if they look sideways at us, if they couldn't even march to Kiev because nobody in their planning staff thought, hey, you know what vehicles would need to go from Belarus to Kiev? Gas. Then they're probably not going to match up against a country like the United States, who knows how to do logistics. And if we decide to march into Russia, you're not stopping us. And all of your old Soviet era equipment is 50 years out of date, and you'll be crushed like bugs. And conventionally, that's true. But I wouldn't bet that Russia's
assured destruction.
I wouldn't bet that Russia's nuclear arsenal is as incompetently managed as their ground infantry has traditionally been for hundreds of years.
Why wouldn't you, though?
Well, because science is science, rocketry is rocketry, and it's a technology that's been around since the 1930s.
But those components have also been around for 50 years.
Yeah, but they're also solid.
Are they maintained?
A lot of them are solid state. I don't know. Do you want to risk Chicago, Miami, Washington D.C., New York, and Seattle?
I understand.
On that
I understand that. Yeah. No. You're right. the risk I'm talking about is far too high. But I got to be honest, I have serious misgivings about the capabilities of their rocket fire. Um,
Maybe, but okay.
It doesn't matter because even if only a third of them launch.
Yeah, so let's say their circular area probability is, 150 miles. Okay, right. Well, you'll miss Dallas and hit Fort Worth. Okay, yay, we win. When you're talking about, 10, 12 megaton nuclear warheads, close counts.
With nuclear war, it's not darts.
Yeah. So we're basically daring the Russians to do anything.
Yes.
We're basically saying
exactly what's going on.
We're basically saying we can do whatever we want because we're the United States, and if we want Ukraine in NATO, then we'll have Ukraine in NATO. Ukraine wants
Dale,
it.
I think it's worse than that.
You have nothing to say about it. And if you try to say anything about it, we'll just obliterate you because you can't defend against us. But you say it's worse than that. How is that?
I think it's even worse than that. I think that they're trying to court Russians in order to get the Russians to tame the Iranians and then get the Iranians to do another stupid nuclear deal where they, pretend to wait to develop nuclear weapons. We don't do anything about it. Whenever the Russians and Americans are involved anymore, the only important stake is Iran.
Okay, but look, assuming even what you said, arguendo, is true, which I do not believe that it is, the way to go about that is not to antagonize Russia by talking about Ukrainian NATO membership. Look, whether the Russians...
Well, I agree. I absolutely agree that I think that it's an absolutely stupid way to go about it. But I'm trying to think in their stupid way of thinking.
But given the Biden administration,
they think this is a threat.
Given the Biden administration,
that
is the stupidest way of going about it, because what other choice would they choose? Okay,
because I think that what they think is that if they can soften up Ukraine, then they can get some softening up in Iran.
Yeah, but that requires Russian help, and the Russians are not going to help us. The Russians are not going to work. Look, whatever else you may say about whatever else you may say about the Russians, anybody that knows anything about them knows that one thing that they will not respond to is threats. The only way that you can get Russians to respond to threats is if they know absolutely that they will be destroyed. And if they think there is any leeway in eliding past your threat, they will use it. Second of all, and whether Russia, or at the time the Soviet Union, it was much the same at that point, but whether Russia deserved the assurances that we would not extend NATO to the west or to the east or not, the fact is those assurances were made. Brent Snowcroft explicitly told Boris Yeltsin that we would not expand NATO to the east. When Yeltsin left and Putin replaced him, I don't think it was a direct replacement. I think there was somebody in between Yeltsin and Putin. But in any event, Putin received the same more or less assurances from NATO. We had no real interest in moving east. And as soon as we'd given them those assurances, we had moved east. Say what you want about the Russians, but they're paranoid. Even during the Cold War, how did Russian military exercises start? They started with a NATO attack in East Germany that they would have to retreat from, regather at some defensible line, and then counterattack and then sweep through Western Europe. Their entire doctrine was based on an attack by NATO because they're paranoid assholes. And by the way, we didn't help either, because in order not to turn all of Germany into an armed camp and to force the entire population out of their homes so that we could build a defense in depth against the Warsaw Pact, we had a policy called forward defense, which meant all of our military forces were right up on the East German, West German border. If you're on the other side of that border, that looks an awfully lot like an offensive gathering of forces, because the Russians know.
We also created NATO.
Yeah, and the Russians know, just as well as we knew, that the only defense for Western Europe would be a defense in depth. And that was the one policy that we did not pursue. We pursued forward defense. And of course, the creation of NATO, remember, it predated the Warsaw Pact. The Warsaw Pact was created in response to NATO's creation.
That's right.
From the Russian point of view, every American move since World War II, after which our alliance kind of broke down, looks pretty offensive from the Russian point of view. Now, we can talk from our part about how we never had any intention of invading Russia, that we were defending against Russia. The reason why we had the forward defense policy.
No, but we're talking about from the Russian point of view.
Yeah, because the Germans would not have allowed us to turn their entire country into an armed camp, building a defense in depth that was, 200 miles in depth. There would have been no Germany left, no Austria for that matter either. We can make all of those excuses, but from the Russian point of view, it looks aggressive. And then, after being specifically told we are not going to expand NATO westward or eastward, okay, how about you, Hungary? How about you, Czechoslovakia? How about you, Poland? And then we started talking to Ukraine. Yeah, the Russians are pretty pissed off. They're pretty paranoid, and we look like assholes. Which is why, as you and I talked about privately, I am increasingly coming to the idea of America being a non-aligned armed neutral. Seems to have worked out pretty well for Switzerland. It hasn't seemed to have materially hindered either their military, political, or social development. And they're right in the middle of the biggest bunch of assholes in the world, the middle of Europe. So,
of course, they're on top of a mountain.
Yeah, they are on top of a mountain.
Or several mountains.
And it is kind of hard to get. They have probably the most defensively structured physical territory and geography in the entire world. However, we have two big oceans. Sure, will it defend us against? Will it defend us against nuclear missiles?
We're pretty impenetrable. No. Yeah.
No, and look, Pearl Harbor notwithstanding, and by the way, Pearl Harbor, great example of American incompetence. It should never have happened. We underestimated the Japanese because they were funny little Asians with poor eyesight, and they were short and tiny.
They told us it was going to happen, and we didn't believe them.
Yeah, and they can't possibly threaten us. I don't think we're quite that dumb anymore, but I'm not sure that a policy of armed neutrality isn't the way to go. And by the way, I'm not sure what purpose NATO serves, at least as an American-led
I haven't been able to
alliance.
Understand that for the past 20 years.
Not since 1991. The best thing that we could have done, and I don't know why George W. or H.W. Bush didn't do it, but the best thing we could have done in 1991, once the Warsaw Pact fell apart, we should have dissolved NATO and told the Europe, or at least withdrawn from NATO. We should have said America is, just like the French did under de Gaulle. Hey, look, we're all with you, but we're not going to be part of the formal alliance.
We're not going to be in all your adventures.
We're withdrawing from the military.
You call us when you need us.
Yeah. The French idea was we're withdrawing from the military part of NATO, but we still really believe in the alliance. And, when I was stationed at headquarters Allied Forces...
We will see you at the parties.
Yeah, when I was stationed at headquarters Allied Forces Central Europe, literally right across the street, outside, on the other side of the gate, across the street, was the French delegation. And the French saw fit to send what would, for us, be a 1-star general, but for the French is a 2-star general because they don't have a 1-star rank. Okay. And they were there, but they weren't they certainly weren't inside the gate. And that's what we should have done. Hey, the Soviet Union has fallen apart. The Warsaw Pact no longer exists. it is not appropriate now for America to be part of NATO, and we would encourage NATO to continue to exist as part of some overall European defense network that is run by Europeans, and America will have an avuncular fatherly attitude towards the new NATO. But
hey, we'll protect our side of the Atlantic.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about any attacks
that.
from our side.
Right.
We got your western flank, and you guys can worry about inter-European problems.
All the other stuff.
Because what happened, we got drug into Kosovo and the collapse of the former Yugoslavia and all of the other problems that arose in the Balkans. Not our business, but NATO made it their business. And look, if the Europeans want to make that their business because it's on their continent, great. Not an American problem, but we made it one because we stayed.
We've actually already got a Lend-Lease program set up just for you.
And by the way, if we were not
and we'll give you a discount this time.
Yeah, look, if we were not part of NATO and the Europeans decided that they wanted to extend whatever NATO would become eastward, I think, it would have been a lot less threatening to Russia because of our lack of involvement in it.
Yes.
And also, let us not forget that however cynically the offer might have been made, and with the full expectation that it would be rejected, Moscow did try to ask what the process would be, what the response would be from the West if they applied for NATO membership.
If who?
What do you mean?
Russia?
Yeah, Russia applied for. Russia didn't formally apply, but Putin asked what the Western response would be. Yeah. Russia officially asked what the response to NATO would be.
That's really hilarious.
If they joined NATO. And look, you can laugh.
At least 10th grade of Catholic school level of trolling.
Yeah, look, you can laugh, but it's undeniable. One thing that NATO did concretely accomplish during its life was to keep Greece and Turkey from annihilating each other. I mean,
sort of.
Except not on Cyprus, but Cyprus
is a little bit of a weird place.
Yeah, yes. But Cyprus never became like the which it would have, absent NATO, it would have been the cause of another Balkan war.
And there was also
Greece and Turkey would have, Greece and Turkey would have gone to war. And
NATO
and
they're kind of always, they're always sort of at this edge of pretend war where they hate each other, but they actually depend on each other for all their tours and all that stuff. It's like, oh, we hate those Cypriots. Can't stand them. Oh, the Greeks. Blah 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 blah.
But
they depend on that.
But I think you're right. I think Putin made that offer kind of trolling because I think he realized.
I think he did.
I think he realized that nobody would allow Russia into NATO, which, by the way, begs the question: why?
Well, I mean, if we're going by
aside the fact that Russia's not a democracy.
Well, we could say that about a few of the other countries as well, but it has never been accepted as a European country. I mean, it is technically a European country.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, most of its population that count towards anything are in the European side of the Ural Mountains. And yet they've always been, the retarded stepsister of Europe.
Yes, as P.J. O'Rourke put it back in the 1990s, Russia has always been the idiot stepsister of Western civilization.
Right. And so there's always been this desire for Russia to be included as part of the real deal. I think Russia is an actually amazing country with amazing people if they could only get out of their own fucking way.
Well, that's always been Russia's problem.
Right. I mean, that's literally the only problem they have. They have tons of smart, industrious, hardworking people, and they just can't get out of their own way.
Yeah, but in their entire history, none of those smart, industrious people have ever experienced actual individual freedom.
That's true.
Ever.
Yeah.
Except maybe for a brief period in the mid-1990s when Yeltsin was running things and the entire country devolved into chaos with the mafia running everything.
There was a freedom there.
Yeah. And so their taste of freedom has been having the mafia run the entire country, which they decided, not a great idea.
Already running the fucking country.
Yes, but they were running it in conjunction with the
Bert
Communist
Kreischer
Party.
made this, I thought, pretty fucking clear.
But again, remember, Bert Kreischer went there during the Yeltsin era when the mafia did run the country.
Yeah, during the 90s, right?
Yeah. But prior to the 1990s, prior to 1993 and after 1997, so basically there was a 4, maybe 5-year period. Let's go to 2000. So a 7-year period where there was some relative individual freedom as long as you did not piss off whoever the local mafia boss was. Food became unaffordable. I mean, Russia really kind of collapsed during those years. So what fixed that? Well, a return to basically totalitarian rule. Let's bring Putin in. He'll run the entire country like his personal dog kennel. Sure, he's going to have a corrupt, kleptocratic government where, like the general who heads their military procurement, who makes something like 8,000 rubles a month in salary, somehow has a $23 million dacha outside of Moscow. Okay, sure. Military procurement is apparently quite lucrative. But that's fine because the mafia won't be running the country anymore. Yeah, it'll be Vladimir Putin, but we're used to that because it was either, before that, it was either the Communist Party running the country. Before that, Joe Stalin, who pretended to be the Communist Party, Vladimir Lenin, and before that, the Tsar. That's what Russians have always known.
The Russians have never had even a moment where they weren't ruled by a dictator.
Yeah, except for a brief period in the 1990s. So Vladimir Putin can go back and start talking about, who ran Kiev and Rus in the year 782. And that's all quite interesting, but it's utterly irrelevant to the fact that Russians have never been free, ever. Russia didn't even get rid of serfdom, for goodness sake, until the end of the 19th century.
Right. And then that led to a revolution.
Yeah. So, the Russian
fucked that up.
Yeah, the Russian experience with freedom has been largely negative the 2 times that they've tried a taste of it. So, I think there is something to be said for a country has to be culturally prepared to exercise freedom responsibly. But look, I'm not saying that we are exercising freedom particularly responsibly in our country anymore.
Not anymore, but at least we had a head start. I mean,
yeah, we just decided to throw it away.
Historically things go forward. Yeah, but we know that historically things go forward and they have setbacks, right? So we've been in a bit of a setback for a while now. It's starting to get to that dangerous territory where the people who are against actual progress, and by progress I mean the inflation of individual rights and protection of those, and also of individual responsibility. We're facing a bit of a bulwark against that, to succumb that individual responsibility to the government being in charge of things.
Yeah, well,
we're a bit of a crossroads right now.
Yeah, well, getting back to Russia, asking Ukraine to join NATO is just an extraordinarily bad idea. And
it's an incredibly stupid idea because all it does is usher us further towards an actual world war.
And look, by the way, while I think it was largely immoral, basically because of who he was dealing with, for Neville Chamberlain to go to Munich and basically give Czechoslovakia to Germany. And as Neville Chamberlain put it, why should we go to war over a people far away about whom we know little?
But you thought you had the authority to.
Yeah. And as it turns out, as a practical matter, they did.
No, he didn't.
Yeah, well, but Hitler got Czechoslovakia. And look, that was cynical. And he came home saying, I believe this agreement means peace in our time. That was a stupid idea based on who he was dealing with. However, what Britain never really worried about, even though there was some fear of it in 1940, they never really thought that even in the case of a general European war, that Britain's actual existence was at stake. They never really thought that invasion was likely from Germany, because Germany has never been a naval power. Germany had no means of projecting force over the ocean, and the Royal Navy was the largest navy in the world. The Germans trying to get across the channel would have been largely a death trap for them. In this case, if Russia turns the keys in those silos, that is an existential threat. So if the choice is, do we tell Ukraine to give up a couple of provinces, 3 provinces in the eastern half of the country, or have World War III with nuclear missiles? Why should we have our cities nuked about a people far away about which we know little?
Yeah, well put and spot on. I mean, I think, Tucker Carlson got excoriated for this, but it was the right question at the time, and it's still the right question. What does this net us? I mean, defeating Russia, yeah, no, I'm down with that. I think that's a noble cause. But at the cost of what? We can defeat Russia in many, many, many ways. We don't have to defeat them right now. We don't have to do it on these terms.
Look, we don't really have to do anything. Have you seen Russia's demography?
Yeah.
Their life expectancy for males is like 60, slightly under 69 years old. They're 10, 15 years behind every other modern developed country. They have no children. Their population is set
and they've just wasted a whole ton of viable men.
Yeah, because that's how Russia wages war. They just throw men at the problem until their enemy runs out of men.
Yeah. But they're having a demographic problem.
Yeah. In fact, there's a great little website. It's called populationpyramid.com. And I am in the wrong browser. Sorry. I need to go to Brave. And let me pull up populationpyramid.com because I actually do want to look at this. So let's set this to 1920 by 1080. Let's go to screen share. I knew we wouldn't get done in 22 minutes. I knew it. I should have kept my mouth shut. Oh, populationpyramid.net. Okay. Why did it open a new window? All right. Darn it. Well, that closes that down. Let me do it again. 1920 by 1080. So it fills up the screen. Let me change the share to... Okay, how come populationpyramid.net is not showing up? Which of these?
I don't see
Brave?
shit.
Brave, okay.
Oh, there we go.
That's
not
what
you're looking for.
That's not the one I want to show, unfortunately. Where's the window that I have up? Populationpyramid.net. Okay, let's try that again. Let's just close that window. And and try to go with a new one. Sorry. New window. I didn't open up a new window last time, so we'll go to new window. That should open up a new Brave window.
There we go.
And that should be showing me the new Brave window, I think. 1920 by 1080. Fortunately, I copied and pasted. There we go. And this shows us world, which we do not want to see. What we want to see is, RUSS, Russian Federation. There we go. And
we've seen this before. Yeah.
yeah, we have seen this before. Now, your image is kind of in the way here. So let me...
so take it out. Just take it out.
Let me hide you there for just a second. That is Russia's demographics. That's what it looks like. This is their projected population. Let's see. This is the current population of Russia. And this is where we expect to be in 2100. So we expect a decline from their peak of 145 million to 112 million over the next couple of decades. They're not having kids. This is unsustainable. And by the way, look at how quickly the number of the blue side of the pyramid disappears as you get older. Look how few men they have compared to women, basically after 60 years of age. It's pretty even at 50 to 59. Actually, it's more even at 50 to 54. So actually, once you go above 55, Russian men just die. So you can see there's still...
that's right. Yeah.
You can see there's still a lot of women left in each of those age cohorts. But the number of men, gone. Which, who needs 75-year-old men anyway? But that's what Russia is facing. This is not a country that...
That's a big drop, though. Right there at, what is that?
50 to 54 is where it's even.
And then it's like a huge drop.
Yeah. And then it goes to, by the time they're 70, 1.6% of the population.
And it's interesting because you can see down here in the younger cohort, the ones who were actually, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but you can tell the ones who died in war because they were younger. I don't know why that bump out there. If you look at the bottom first four bars of blue and pink.
Sure.
Why is there a bump out there? Where did those extra people come from?
Okay, what bump? Give me an age cohort so I can tell what you're looking at.
I can't see. I can't. It's too small. Let me look at the bars at the bottom. Okay. So
here's what we can do. Or can we? Control plus? No, that doesn't work. Let's see if I can do this. Well, that's the maximum the bar size is going to let us see.
Okay, no, that's fine. Let's see. So we have 25 to 29, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Or is it 25 to 29? Yeah. And it closes down. Then all of a sudden it bumps out for the next cohort. I don't understand that.
Okay. Well, here's what this says. People who are 35 to 39 years old. So 6.3 million men, 6.4 million women in the age cohort of 35 to 39. Notice that is the last big bump in birth rates, that cohort right there.
Yeah.
And then notice it collapses after that.
Yeah.
Okay. So what year is this?
So
what year is this?
From 0 to up to that age?
Yeah. This is from the age of 0 to 4, 5 to 9.
Oh, it's all from 0 to that age. I thought each one was its own band. Okay.
Yeah. So this is the number of people in each age cohort. So what is really interesting.
Well, okay. So then that's right then. If it's in each cohort, so in this most expanded band, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 26 to 20 something. I think that's
25
what
to
that says.
this is 25 to 29. This is 30 through 34.
Maybe it's 36 to
35
yeah,
to
that
39.
one. 35 to 39. Okay. That's the largest band.
Yeah. Oh, that's perfectly explainable. What year is this?
I don't know.
2024. What year was 30 years ago? 1994. When did the Soviet Union collapse? 1991. So the second the Soviet Union collapsed, their birth rates started collapsing.
Okay,
as
but
well.
here's what I don't understand. It is, I'm sorry, Dale. I know I'm being annoying right now. But is that the number of people in that cohort during those years?
No, this is the number of people in Russia now in each age group.
In Russia now.
At each age group.
Got it. Okay. I'm sorry. That's why I was confused.
So this is the current number of people in Russia in this age group.
In each of the age cohorts.
And what this tells you was in 1995, or basically since 1994, we can see that their birth rates collapsed. And so
dramatic.
So this cohort right here, people who are 20 to 24, these are the people who were born in the year 2000 to the year 2004.
Right. So what are the ones in that biggest cohort there? The 36 to, that one.
Yeah. Those are people who were born between 1980, 2024. So let's go back 35 years. So that would be 1995. So these are people who were born from 1980 these are the people who were born from 1985 to 1990.
Oh, so okay, right before the collapse.
Yes. These were the people who were born from 1990 to 1995. 95 to 2000, 2000 to 2005, etc.
They have a weird dichotomy towards females there.
Yeah, that's because men die in Russia. That's what
it counts for.
Yeah. So here is the people who are in the 45 to 49-year-old age group. And look, it's still a dichotomy. Really, it's only close at the 40 to 44-year-old age group, where they have about 5.5 million of each. And then the number of men collapses because they just die once they hit 45. Russian men start to
because
die.
They were going into combat. They were the ones involved in all the internecine wars and whatever else. Yeah.
No, they're dying of alcoholism, largely.
Well, and that too.
Yeah, but
you would think that women would die of alcoholism too, right?
Women are more stable than men in that sense. Men will drink themselves to death way more than women do.
Amen.
But the fact is, Russia's demography is awful, and they still aren't having kids. So they're having half the number of kids that they had 35 years ago. Well, it depends on who you look at. If we go to Western Europe as a whole, Western Europe
kind of similar,
not looking great. But
it's interesting that men are the ones who are dying out.
Yeah, well,
I mean, women aren't exactly being stable, but
yeah, well, everybody dies eventually, but sure. But that's Western Europe as a whole. Some countries look worse. If we go to Germany, for example, Germany looks really bad.
This is like, why are all the Western countries are where the men are dying?
Yeah, well, look, women always live longer than men. That's just standard. Men tend to do much more risky jobs. Men tend to commit suicide much more than women do, overwhelmingly more than women do.
Actually, women tend to commit more suicide when men are more successful.
Yes. Yeah, women attempt suicide more. Men commit suicide more. But
Right.
that's Germany. But I mean, look, it's not just entirely a Western thing either. Well,
Yeah, no, I don't think it is.
China isn't looking great either.
At least China's at least somewhat commensurate.
Yeah,
but yeah, that's a really, really, really bad.
I mean, just look over here at the population projections.
Yeah.
We're going from 1.425 million to 766, or 1.425 billion to 766 million. We're talking about a 50% collapse.
Well, they've
population.
already gone below India, I believe.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they've already gone below India. And while we're here, United States of America. There we go. Finally, it showed up. We're not doing great. We're not
doing great, but we seem to be kind of even.
Yeah, we are basically going
and we're still going up.
Yeah, we're basically gonna sort of level off at 390 million people projected.
Jesus Christ,
so we're in way better shape than most countries in the world. However, we're still not in great shape. I mean, despite the fact that they're largely a narco-terrorist state at this point. This is an indication of a problem, the very bottom cohort. But that's a much more positive population pyramid. At least that ensures a growing population for the next 40 or 50 years before it starts to tail off. So that's what it looks like. So when you look at Russia, Russia is currently a problem, but this tells me that Russia's problematic nature is going to largely decline in importance fairly quickly in the very near future, which, by the way, is true of China.
They're going to run out of men to kill.
Yeah, which, by the way, is true of China as well. Looking at their population pyramid as we did.
Same idea, yeah.
Yeah, same idea. I mean, if whatever they're going to do in Taiwan, they need to do it now. And by the way, this is the worst time for us to be concerned with Russia whenever we have China just sitting out there waiting. But give it 20 years,
how much is it?
Give it 25 years. Give it 25 years. If we can just keep things steady, both of these states become far less problematic for us or for the rest of the world.
Oh, you're doing that bit where you think that government is patient.
Yeah, well, of course, government's
That's
not
a
patient.
good one. I love that one.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorites.
Yeah, but really, have you ever heard of there's a game, it's a fairly popular game. It's kind of, although not a very realistic one, simulation of naval battles. It's called World of Warships.
Yeah, I have heard of that.
And in World of Warships, there are certain victory conditions in the battle. And once you've met those victory conditions, you know you're going to win. You don't have to do anything else. And there is a guy on YouTube. His name is The Mighty Jingles. He's a guy that spent a career in the Royal Navy. He's retired. Now he plays games. And he does a lot of videos on World of Warships where he actually shows you some of these battles. And one of the things he has as part of his regular stuff is called a game of throws, where a team who is about to win the game decide that, you know what, we're going to win, but what if we won harder? And they end up losing the game. And he always says, if you're winning, win. There's no reason to win harder. So, there'll be a minute left in the game. You've captured all of the territories you're supposed to capture with your ships. They cannot possibly come back. The only way they can win is to destroy all of your ships. So the winning strategy is stop, leave, go to the edge of the map, make it hard for them to find you with their remaining ships, and let
into battleship.
Let the time run out. No, what we're going to do is I'm going to take my cruiser right into the middle of three battleships. Yeah, I'm going to take my cruiser right in the middle of three battleships and open fire on them and see what happens. Why? And that's the
Right.
same thing with both Russia and China. We probably don't need to expend a lot of effort. We probably don't need to win harder. The Chinese decided to lose when they decided they would implement the one-child policy and they would cease to reproduce at replacement rate. Even if all of the Chinese now got together and decided to have kids, it wouldn't matter because those kids would not be regular, well-trained workers for another 30 years.
Right.
And they wouldn't even enter the workforce as newbies for another 20. So they've already
sort of an Eastern philosophy to wait out your enemies.
Yeah, wait them out. They're already in decline. Yeah, we're in decline, but we're not in decline as steep as, Western Europe, Germany. France is still doing relatively well compared to like Germany, but most of Western Europe is in decline. Russia is in decline. China is in decline. We have seen them at the apex of their power. They're now going to have significantly more internal issues. China is going to have, in the next 15 years, they're going to have more retirees than they have workers. Who's going to feed them? Same thing with Russia.
We're also facing, yes.
Same thing with the Europeans, but they're facing it way worse than we are. So there's no reason to antagonize Russia by talking about Ukraine membership. I would posit that Ukraine is probably more useful as a buffer state between Russia and NATO than it is as a NATO ally on the Russian border. Although technically, since we have Poland, we already have a NATO ally on the Russian border.
Well, now, didn't Finland just sign?
Oh, yes. And now there's Finland and Sweden. One thing Vladimir Putin has been very successful at is uniting Europe against him.
But you know what? Finland and Sweden should have been in that in the first place.
Well, Sweden has traditionally been a neutral country. And
I understand that. And
ever since
Finland has also been scared of taking those chances.
Since 1939 and 1940, during the Winter War, there's a term called Finlandization, which means you get to be an independent country, but you have to do what the Soviet Union tells you. And that was basically Finland's existence. They got to be independent, but their army was basically...
And the Latvian countries too. I mean, Estonia and whatever. I mean, they didn't...
Well, I mean, they were actually physically just taken over by the Russians in 1940 or 41. So
more so than Finland, yes. That's true.
Finland fought well enough and killed enough Russians that they came to a modus vivendi. Once the Russians got the Karelian Peninsula, they had the strategic goals that they wanted accomplished. They didn't need to actually run Finland, so they let Finland remain independent. But of course now...
Finland's also not exactly a desirable country.
Yeah, I'm not sure what you get when you get Finland. You get a lot of reindeer, not much else, and a lot of snow.
And snow and ice.
Not that Russia is a foreigner to snow and ice, but still.
And then they don't even have any oil, which is...
Yeah, they have, exactly. But this all increasingly begins to seem to me like European issues. And I'm not sure what part the United States plays in that. Either we are the world's policeman or we are not. And if we're not, we don't need to be in NATO, and we don't really need to have these formal military treaty obligations with all of the European countries. I mean, I'm all for maintaining very friendly relations with everyone who wants to be friendly with us. I'm not entirely sure why we should be the centerpiece of, in the absence of the Soviet Union, I'm not sure why we need to be the centerpiece of any alliance.
I've been saying this now, I don't know for how long. I think NATO has been dead for a very long time. I don't see the efficacy of it for us. And I really, especially since nobody actually does the work besides us to maintain this alliance. Poland, again, I'm partial to Poland because they actually do they know they have more at stake. Poland's been pretty good. So has some of the former Czech countries. But I mean, Germany, France has done pretty good. England, no, not so great. Spain, no, not so great. Portugal, not so great. I mean, if we're gonna pay for all this guns, and you're gonna pay for is butter, well, there's gonna have to be some remuneration coming back the other way.
Yeah,
I'm tired of this.
Yeah, and look, Donald Trump was right about the Europeans not paying their part, and
That's exactly right.
And by the way, now the Europeans, one thing that the Ukraine war has done, it has shown the Europeans kind of the error of their ways. Trouble is that they now have so much committed to social spending and so little committed to the military. It would require a massive structural change to how their government is funded and how their procurement systems run that I'm not sure that they can accomplish. So they may realize what a horrible mistake they made. I'm not sure that means that they'll ever do anything about it.
They'll come crying to daddy. They always come crying to daddy.
Yeah, well, crying to daddy has always been an option. I'm not sure it should be an option anymore. Actually, I am pretty sure it shouldn't. But
I am completely...
Our 22 minutes turned into 42 minutes. We've been doing this for 2 solid hours. So,
well, we had a lot of time to make up for. We haven't talked to each other, at least.
Well, we've talked to each other, but we haven't had a podcast for a while. But anyway, it's probably time to wrap this one up. So, Michael, as always, a pleasure. We'll talk to you again next time.
Hey, thank you, listeners, for showing up.
Yes.
Love you, Dale. Bye.
All right. Talk to you later, buddy. All right. Well, you've been watching the Observations podcast for Sunday, the 7th of April, 2024. Thanks for joining us. Apologies for the technical issues at the beginning, but we managed to get a show put out after all, despite all of that. Have a great week. We will talk to you again next time. Until then, so long.